What if all my sentences finished with a little bit of a tone going up at the end? That would be annoying. I wanted today to give a quick definition, a working definition that I think works well within the harm reduction addiction mindset of what is problematic intoxicant use. Now, you can apply this beyond just intoxicant use, which we usually mean chemical, ingestion of chemicals, so to speak. There is also what they generally call process addictions. And process addictions are behaviors that are habit forming that are not necessarily the direct ingestion of intoxicants through, drug or drinking means of ingestion. It could be gambling, for example, which is ingested through actions. I guess you could say ingested or whatever, but participated in. So anything that you do has a neurochemical, reaction internally to how that goes. And you certainly find what seems to be just a hardwired or pre-existent tendency to either have problematic or non-problematic use of these things. Now, when we're working with harm reduction, you may have picked up somewhere along the line with any of the shows that I do. One of the things is it's very focused on kind of medical and psychological and clinical approaches to how we label problems. First of all, the labeling. In a harm reduction mindset, technically you don't usually use words like alcoholic or addict. The reason for that is that they're not necessarily medical terms to use those. We think of them as that because they're used a lot, but they're more cultural within a certain culture of one, largely believed in and largely practiced way to control problematic substance use. Or alcohol use disorder would be, for example, the term we use for straight up AA related problems, which, remember, Alcoholics Anonymous was started and still in many groups focuses exclusively on alcohol abuse. You have Narcotics Anonymous, Cocaine Anonymous, lots of other anonymouses that are out there for Gamblers Anonymous, for example, things like that are focused on that. And many of those terms, whether they originated in the 12-step community or not, are often used by that or used just in kind of common parlance to explain a problem in a sort of cultural shorthand. And so I just think it's important. And as a therapist, I believe in giving people the empowerment to self-define and even self-label, if you will. I don't think it's empowering to tell someone you have to call yourself this or you won't get better. Okay. Now, that goes against some of the strict philosophies of the 12-step community. However, you've heard on this show, I have a lot of people who come on who love and participate in the 12-step community who have, who have a similar concern, is that the forced labeling, many people would consider that to be sort of an old-fashioned tradition, not necessarily based off of a lot of research and not based off of a lot of modern approaches. However, many people do find those labels to be a helpful way, if they're done without shame, in an empowering way, to identify with a community or with a problem in a way that helps them, then it helps them. And so part of harm reduction is, that's very important, is you don't tell people what to do, but you help them to determine whether or not what they're doing is harmful or not harmful. So there's two ways to define if there is a problematic use of a comfort behavior, a intoxicant, or a substance of any kind that, either a substance or practice that is being used in that way. It's a fine line in some ways, because using something to distract ourselves from stress is why we use comforting behaviors or comforting substances. And so if we labeled that as problematic no matter what, that means everybody out there who has a glass of wine at the end of the day and it kind of helps you unwind, and maybe you even do it most days or whatever, does not, that's not necessarily problematic. So here's two good measures that you can use. There's lots of criteria for alcohol use disorder or addictive disorder, polysubstance dependence, whatever. Yeah, I'm just showing off them, pulling out names of different diagnoses with addiction. But a lot of that diagnostic criteria does revolve around these kinds of things as well. So two normal ways to evaluate if you're having a problem. One is, what happens when you stop on a day where you cannot get a hold of or cannot participate in either the behavior that you usually do or the substance that you usually use. On a day where you can't get it, what happens? How big of a deal is it? What lengths do you go to make sure that you don't run out? Or when you do run out, how rough is that for you? How many days before something bad is going to happen? before you're going to have either a major crisis, or perhaps you're just really, really irritable with everybody, like to a certain point. Now, look at this. But in fact, both these things, look at them as a range, right? To see how tricky and how problematic is it if I cannot get a hold of, or am not able through circumstance or whatever reason to do the thing that I usually do. Okay. Now, is the thing itself inherently unhealthy or healthy? That's not what we're asking right now. That's an important question, but that's not what we're asking right now, because there are a lot of unhealthy things that we engage in infrequently that we would not welcome someone saying, don't go get that ice cream cone ever again, or whatever. So there are lots of things we do that might be beyond what a doctor would say is strictly healthy, right? But ask ourselves this: what happens when I can't get a hold of it? Second thing to ask ourselves is, how much, on a scale here, of course, again, how much is the thing I'm doing distracting me from being able to engage in my life's issues? Does my life have a lot of problems that I am completely becoming avoidant of more and more, particularly if I'm being avoidant of it through use of a substance or practice of a certain behavior? Okay. That is, to me, one of the biggest signs of problematic usage. And sometimes those actually, even though frequency and intensity of use usually also demonstrate a problem, but usually, if it's happening all the time and you're getting completely intoxicated to a point where, whatever, that's usually a reason by itself also. However, to me, engagement is actually even a better measure, because you might have someone who, drinks or uses a drug pretty infrequently, but they also never engage. They use it when they have to, when they're close to engaging with a life problem, and then the rest of the time they don't need it to avoid it, and they're not getting it done. So that would be an example of problematic usage that might not be a huge amount, right? Or even a regular amount. Whereas, once again, that wine drinker I mentioned, or someone who's staying within, doctors will tell you that there is a medically safer way, very, very few drinks, for example, but even if they're daily, 1 to 2 drinks or so, is not considered to be medically problematic, because it does not increase tolerance, and it doesn't contribute to some of the problems that say. Now, that is contested by some people. Will say that any use at all, and certainly you can't make a case that there's any such thing as an amount of use of alcohol that is zero risk and zero health risk either. and low risk is not no risk, right? Ingesting alcohol at all is not as healthy as not ingesting it. That's just the way it is. And, there is some risk there, but there is such a thing as lower risk behavior. The use of intoxicants at a low level consistently is actually thought to be less likely to be problematic than occasionally huge spikes. So if instead of 1 to 2 drinks a day, I have, 10 to 14 drinks for the week, but I have them all on Saturday afternoon, then that's actually more problematic drinking than if I have 1 to 2 a day. Now, there's no rule that says you have to do one or the other of those two things, by the way. But so anyway, look at, is this causing a maladaptive pattern where you are disengaging to the point where it's no longer just a distraction for an evening so I can get to sleep. It's actually a distraction for, 3 months until that problem becomes a huge problem or whatever. And tie that in with the first question that we asked, which is, when I can't get a hold of, and I realize that the alcohol cabinet is empty, or I'm out of, whatever that I'm out of, or I can't do that thing. How bad do I take it? And what happens, and how much does everybody around me go, oh no? One of the useful things about exploring problematic use with a definition like that is it helps you to break it down in your day-to-day. And sometimes people find that a little less threatening to take that into a counseling session, particularly if your counselor is harm reduction based. Then they should be willing, and really anybody in practice should be willing to talk to you about those things and say, okay, here's what's problematic about the way I do this thing, or ingest this thing, or whatever I do with this thing. And it gets us on the path to making some better decisions. And already, by recognizing, what these things are, it can also give us things that we can focus on to start improving the way that we're living and be more healthy and happy. I got a little robotic there at the end. I don't know why that happened, but it happened. Let's all just celebrate the fact that we were here to see it happen. Hey, everybody. By the way, speaking of charities, go to transcendingbarriersatl.org to visit Transcending Barriers Atlanta, a nonprofit that is helping Black trans individuals to address and deal with the legal issues that they do seem to disproportionately have land upon their shoulders, in our society and culture, and to once again live happier and healthier lives, also through advocacy and education. So go there to transcendingbarriersatl.org, ATL like Atlanta, to share their website, to get involved in what they're doing, help them promote activities and awareness and campaigns, to donate and all that jazz. If you do support The Broken Brain as a Patreon member and would like your donation to go towards them, or if you've joined within the month of April, then your donation will automatically, 50% of it, will go to Transcending Barriers Atlanta every single month as long as you are a member of the patronage. There's also some cool bonus materials and things that you'll be able to get as well. A video of the episodes that are recorded here for the show, our an Anne of Avonlea fan tracking, where we talk about the psychological elements of that show on Netflix. Thursday Histories, we're diving into history of culture and mental health, as well as one-off episodes that are only available over on the Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/brokenbrain or dwighthurst.com/support for multiple ways that you can support the podcast. I sure do appreciate ya all out there listening, and please, if you also take the time, even if you can't at this point become a donor or help us to participate in that way, please consider sharing these episodes with other people around you in your life, because that does help us to share the show and share the material, which hopefully you agree is useful material. Talk to you all again very, very soon, and we'll have a new interview tomorrow. Bye-bye.